Hello, before you all leave, we'll try to be short and sweet.
Short.
And there will be a reception, but you can't go to it until we're done, so that's your incentive to stay and listen to us. So let me start just by thanking a few people and then the audience more generally and our speakers. Let me start with a few people from the Emmett Institute, in particular Daniel Melling. I don't know if Daniel is in the room, but he is the person who made all of this happen, who got you all here, who developed an incredible RSVP list that got 300 people saying that they were going to come to our symposium, and really handled all the logistics, and we couldn't do it without him. He's quite extraordinary. I also want to, even though they're no longer in the room, I want to add my thanks, along with Kara, to Dan Emmett and to Shirley Shapiro, two of our incredible supporters. And I actually have the great privilege of holding the Shirley Shapiro chair in environmental law, and we could not do what we do without them, and they really are extraordinary. Fran Pavley and Mary Nichols are also on our board. We have fabulous board members, and they've been incredibly supportive of our efforts, and I want to thank them as well. I also want to thank Kara Horowitz, Julia Stein, Meredith Hankins, and Sean Hecht for organizing today's, I think, extraordinary event. They were the brains and the substance behind thinking about what we were going to talk about and who we were going to have speak to you, and they did a terrific job, so thank you. And then finally, William Boyd actually is the person who came up with the idea to look retrospectively on the environmental legacy of Jerry Brown, and then that evolved into also looking forward to the prospects for a Newsom administration. So thanks also to William for that idea. And then thanks to all of our panelists. What an incredibly rich and interesting day. It was great to hear from everybody, and I really appreciate it. And then to the audience, thanks so much, particularly to those of you who have stuck it out and who are still in the room. I think this is the best turnout we've ever had at a symposium, and it was great, and you've been attentive and great questioners, and it's really been great to have you all here. I just want to make a few observations about the day, in addition to the thank yous. I want to start with maybe a really obvious point, but man, housing and transportation are hard. And that, every time I hear it, they're very, very tough problems to solve. And this is less about housing, more about transportation, but one observation I've made in the past about California environmental politics is that we're not very good at changing individual behavior. We're pretty good at regulating tailpipe emissions, at regulating stationary sources, at transforming the electricity sector where you have very few players. But when you ask individuals to engage in serious behavioral change, it's really hard to figure out how to get them to do that, whether it be taking public transportation, carpooling, buying electric vehicles, although financial incentives help, or I thought Mary's story this morning about getting car owners of old, dirty cars to mandating that they change the equipment on their cars. That bill got overturned really quickly because it's really hard to ask people to make individual sacrifices and to figure out how to do it in a way that is not politically unpopular. So that's a struggle I think we're going to continue to need to figure out how to fight as we move forward. And as we heard from this afternoon's panel, reducing vehicle miles traveled is one of the biggest conundrums. We don't know how to do it. We haven't done it well. Changing our land use planning is really, really hard, but it's also hard to get people out of their cars, to get them to stop driving. The first thing that households do when they get enough money to get just above very, very low poverty is buy a car, and it's very tough to change that. A couple of other observations. In other respects, if, as William quoted James Fallows as saying, if California is the resistance, in a lot of ways, the resistance is working. And I thought there were a lot of inspiring examples today that made me more hopeful about the future than when I read the headlines about what's going on in Washington, D.C. But it's also the case that governing is hard, and I think we saw that from the panels, the detailed implementation of policy. We heard from incredible people working for the government, from Mary to Joaquin to Yana to Liana to Jeannie, who are really devoted to making California policy work, and it's hard work, and you just see the kind of depth of detail. And we've got, past government employees on the panel, many government employees in the audience, and we should applaud you all because it is not easy to do what you do and to actually take kind of grandiose policy visions and turn them into something real. So it's great to see smart, quality people involved in working on these problems. Another observation, California is leading and also learning in a remarkable number of areas. It's not just climate policy, it's not just air pollution policy, or at least it's many policies that relate to both of those issues but that are independently important, including housing and transportation and water. We're not always succeeding at a pace that we need to be succeeding. Housing and transportation, I think, provide the best examples of that. But there's a lot of innovation going on in California across a bunch of policy areas, and I think we demonstrated that today. There are also some encouraging structures in place for helping to transmit California leadership outward. And I think we heard about some of those from Ken Alex, the Under 2 MOU, or Under 2, I guess the Under 2 Coalition now, work that organizations like David Hayes' organization are doing, the work of networks of progressive attorneys general across the country in resisting a lot of Trump administration rollbacks and also in initiating their own policies. And that's encouraging. I think those are structures that didn't always exist, and to the degree we build on them, that's a recipe for really implementing Paris. I mean, Paris really is not about top-down regulation. It really is about bottom-up, and the bottom-up spread of ideas and of technology and policy are going to occur through these networks, and they're really, really important. And even on the Trump rollbacks, what in some respects look like the most discouraging part of environmental policy today, the resistance is working in a lot of ways, at least for now. I mean, we heard the statistics from David, an extraordinary one-loss record in taking the Trump administration to court on environmental rollbacks. As we were sitting here, I got an email from Meredith Hankins, one of our great Emmett Institute policy fellows, about a letter that was sent today, both to the state of California and to the Trump administration from the automakers, saying that a freeze on the auto standards and a rollback of the California waiver would destabilize the auto market and may cause a loss of profits. So that's the auto industry doing it. It's not the oil industry, which is in some respects probably the real beneficiary of the rollbacks, right? But that's really, really important, and that could upend. I think that's what Mary was suggesting today when she said she didn't think that she thought there might be more negotiations going on. So I will stop there, except to thank all of you again and to say that I found today both inspiring and discouraging in some respects, but overall really inspiring, especially the hard work that so many good people are doing to really try to advance progressive environmental policy.
So I'm going to be very quick. I bragged a lot about your Attorney General. In the room, I want to introduce you to Arsenio Mataka, who is Javier Becerra's right hand on all of these issues. Arsenio has provided amazing leadership. He, prior to this job, was in Cal EPA, having Jana's job, working on a lot of environmental justice issues. Got the Attorney General's office involved in that. So I wanted to do a little shout out to Arsenio. And we have at least a couple more lawyers from the Attorney General's office in California. So please raise your hands. Thank you all for your public service. I'm going to just close with an observation. It's a compliment to the Emmett Institute, to UCLA, to the leadership here and the faculty. This conference, the breadth of this conference is stunning, but appropriate. And it's a reason why I think many of us are drawn to these issues now. I've been involved in the environmental and natural resource issues area for 30 years. I will tell you that after about 20, it was getting a little tiring because the issues had been sort of boxed into different silos, and we were making progress. When President Trump says, our air is cleaner, our water is cleaner, well, he's actually right about that, and a lot of people have that in their head. But sometime in the last 15 to 20 years, we have discovered that, whoa, we actually have systemic issues that go to every corner of our life and lifestyle that are creating real questions about our sustainability as a state, as a country, as a people on this globe, starting with climate change. But that climate change affects everything. Climate change is our energy sector. That is how we live. That is our housing sector. That is our transportation sector. That is our economic sector. And the issues that many of us care about, we all have become more and more important and interwoven. So it's a tremendous challenge for lawyers, for policymakers, for folks in government, for citizen activists, how to get our arms around these tremendously important issues and change some huge levers in our society. And I just compliment the agenda because it took on these very hard issues, and I compliment the state of California and all the other states that are falling in. The good news here is that folks get it, are seeing the impacts of climate change, are recognizing that we have to change how we use our resources on this earth. And so let's just keep it going. And I assume this is the first annual or second annual that we'll have this every year, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.